Great to talk to you both today. Congratulations on getting a film done. I think that's always needed. Congratulations more on the fact that you get a film made in the first place. That's a feat on its own.
Thank
It's an
you.
absolute miracle.
How did the idea for this come about, Miley? I'll ask you personally. Was this something that you had in mind for a long time? Was there kind of a thematic or narrative spark that kicked it all off?
Well, for starters, Kate and I had been looking for something like we've known each other for 20 years and kind of worked in the periphery. We wanted to find something to work on together. And so I remember we had a meeting and I said, there's these three ideas for films that I'm interested in. And there were two rom-coms and one horror. And the horror was the idea of this couple who were dealing with the trauma and unsaid grief between them, and it was manifesting in very dark ways. And Kate was like, "Ooh, ooh, that one." Even though I'm like, "Sure you don't like the rom-coms?" And so we started down that path and developed it together. And I think for me, it was just so interesting looking at the psychology of how people deal with their own pain and their past and the consequences that it has on presence and their relationships with themselves as well.
The demonic presence here that serves as kind of a representation of guilt and addiction and a few other themes. How did that particular, I guess, persona or characterization come about? Was there kind of a set of guidelines, creative guidelines to balance that metaphor versus literal lean?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, for starters, for me, it was just drawing on like that feeling of when you're in that space, there's a dark presence there, and there is something there, and it's feeding off of you. And I think the turning point was the realization that often these things come in as a protection device for you. And we realized during the development process that this was very much the monster of addiction and needed to abide by those rules. So we, I remember Kate, like she made me do up this whole sheet on all the rules of the monster so we could make sure that we were sticking to it. And every single rule that the monster follows in the film is how addiction works. And, we consulted with experts as well to make sure that it was universal in that as well.
I think you can definitely feel that in the film that there's kind of a specific psychological guideline that is kind of helping structure the whole drama, especially in regard to the horror side, which I always appreciate. Kate, in terms of your development process with Miley, how important was this psychological element to this film?
Oh, it's hugely important. And I think it's the way that an audience will connect with the film as well. You may not necessarily have an addiction to alcohol or addiction to drugs in any way, but you can be addicted to your phone, and I found it became a really personal story to every individual that was working on the film. Like, what is their connection to addiction? And ultimately, deeper down, we discovered that a lot of the times addiction is there because you don't want to feel something. And it's, that idea of dealing with trauma is sometimes in the not dealing with it that is the interesting space to work in that we hadn't seen in films before. And I think that was something that Miley and I really wanted to make something that was new and different. And we knew that that was going to be a challenge, but it is also a great opportunity to push boundaries with things. But in those pushing boundaries, I think having some rules and some guidelines so that you don't go off on a crazy path of, oh, this would be really cool, but does it resonate for an audience when they're watching it if it doesn't follow the rules?
In terms of, I guess, I don't know, influence or inspiration, for me anyway, when I was looking at the creature, the demonic presence, I could see some Japanese horror iconography there. There's certain hair elements. Were there any films or other creations that served as inspiration, or is it more like we'll step away from as much as we can to try to create something that's completely within our own creative endeavors? And this is for either of you.
Oh, my favorite subject. Yes, you picked up on the Japanese horror. Huge fan. Um, Not visually, but Kurosawa's Pulse, and the meditative like grief and like the slow creeping fear of the ghosts in that, um, like was really influential to me. I watched it for the first time when we were developing it, and I was just like, oh, there's something about that. But yeah, all grew up with The Ring and The Grudge and all of that. But in later years, I'm just a huge James Wan fan, and Mike Flanagan, and they've both used these kind of shadow figures in their work to represent different things. Um, I don't think there was any question what the creature would look like once we realized that we kept referring to the addiction monster as like the shadow. So it needed to be that kind of darker version of Claire, our main character.
Pre-production, bringing our costume designer, our hair and makeup designer, our production designer all together and kind of having a really great conversation about what is your darkness, what does it look like. We wanted the demon to feel like a real thing, and there was this really great moment of like leaning into the idea of a cat and a leech. I don't know, Miley, if you want to talk about like the cat and the leech kind of metaphors of addiction and what they are.
Yeah, because that was by that stage, I think we had Cade on board, and Cade was so instrumental in forming the movement and the look because she is this incredible movement artist, contortionist, and showed us some of the things that she could do around the time we were like kind of nailed down on what the movements were. And the cat in that it's like, low and predatory.
And comforting. Like cats were like the comfort that addiction makes you feel. And the sounds and the purring and
Which infiltrated our sound. By the time we got to sound, and Envelope Studios did our sound, and I was so happy with what they did, and they incorporated so many layers of sound, and there's cat purrs in there as well, and it's all mixed in, so it's subliminal, but.
and then the leech was this idea that like addiction, sucks the life out of you and takes what it needs. And, then we were looking at like the textures of leeches and, and the microscopic detail that's on cats' tongues and that kind of thing, like really got to go wild with it.
That's great. It's really interesting hearing about the elements going into this. Now, talking about lessons learned, I always like this idea that, well, everyone knows that every film project is a learning experience, no matter how far into a career you are or whether you're just starting. So I'm interested, this being your first feature as director, is there something that you walked away going, wow, I can't believe you don't hear directors talk about this. Why don't more filmmakers talk about this particular element in the production timeline?
It's funny, and I have a lot of lessons like that, but I feel like I never heard it before, but since I've learnt the lesson, I now hear other people saying they have the same experience. And it's things like how quickly the pre-production period will go, and like there's this kind of fine line between preparing too early before you have the funding in place, and once you get that, then it's go, go, go. And I felt like I started preparing with the mindset we were going to make it even before we had the full budget in place. and I still felt like I didn't have enough time. We were working such huge days. And then I feel like I was still preparing while we were shooting. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but maybe I'm just a perfectionist, but there's that. And I guess how much the film changes in the edit. I had so many lessons on things that we didn't need in the script and we shouldn't have filmed. Um, I mean, on one hand, it's great to have this kind of buffet to be able to um, play with different versions of the film in the edit. But it's, as Kate will tell you, it's also a very expensive way to do it.
Yeah. Kate, producing, I can imagine it's a constant challenge working with a tight schedule and what I can imagine is a tight budget. How was this experience on the producing front?
Oh, do you know what? I actually think that that's a space that I thrive in. I very much believe that the what some people might look at as restrictions actually create force more creativity and force you to actually think about what is important. And Miley and I so often would talk about the film. I don't know, we believe that at a certain point the film has a life of its own and it will tell you what it wants. And if you don't listen to that, you're you're doing the wrong thing. And so many times I think people would look at us and be like, why aren't you guys stressed? And it's like, well, because we know this is what the film wants and we can push for what we want, but the film's going to push back and let us know what it
And
wants.
that was what was so great about working with Kate as a producer as well, because, every project you do, there's going to be catastrophes and probably several of them along the way. And, you know, whenever they would happen, Kate and I would get together and go, okay, this is what's happening. And I don't know, like there was something between us. Instead of crying, we would just laugh and go, okay, the film wants us to go this direction. We wanted it to go here, but it wants to go this direction. So we're like, okay, cool. And we always had this like faith, like the worst times in films is the waiting to see whether you're going to get that money, the waiting to see whether that actor is going to sign on, the waiting to see if you're going to get into a festival. But we just always had faith that it was going to happen for us.
Fantastic. It sounds like a great approach. Just regarding quickly casting Rose Riley, quite a good performance. A lot of it relies on her emotional state. How did casting her come about?
So, off the aforementioned things changing on a film, um, Rose came in quite late on the process, and it was an absolute miracle having there because she just stepped in, she stepped out of her comfort zone and committed herself fully to the role. And Rose is just the nicest human being. There is no ego, but incredibly smart and incredibly intuitive as an actor. So for me, being my first feature, one of the things I wanted was just really nice cast because there's so many other things you have to worry about. You don't want to worry about dealing with personality issues. And both Rose and George were so incredibly nice and committed to their characters with each other and to just going there with the role. Because I think this is the first horror she's ever done. And she says that she doesn't like watching horror because she gets too scared. So being able to work with that, it's honestly been one of my favorite things about doing the film.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for me time-wise. Thank you so much for both of you sharing your time with me today, and let's hope all the best for this film. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you so much.
Guillermo. We can't wait for people to see it in cinemas. It's
And South by Southwest next month.
it's an epic experience.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.